Let's drive a rover in a square using the Viam TypeScript SDK. You'll need a computer to run the SDK code, a code editor like VS Code, and Node.js installed. You can use your own rover, but I'm going to borrow one from the Viam New York City office. All right, it's our turn to drive. We have 10 minutes to borrow this rover. And here we are in the Viam application. These are the components of our rover, and we can look at more details on the right-hand side as they correspond to the left-hand components. Let's go over to the Control tab. Once again, we see different components of our rover. If we go down to the overhead cam, you can see this is a live view. Actually, it's refreshing every second. Let's make it a live view of the Viam office, and that's the rover that we're going to play with. Go over to the Viam base, toggle on keyboard control. Now we can use the WASD keys on our keyboard to drive our rover around. All right, so you can play as long as you want. If you want more time on your rover borrowing, you can go over to the Extend tab and extend your time. Now it's time to get started with our SDK. So let's go over to our terminal window. I'm on a Mac. You'll want to make sure you have Node already installed on your computer, and then you'll enter npm create robot-app. And you'll be prompted to enter a project name. Call it my example. Once it's set up, you see some instructions. We'll move into our project directory. We'll need to update our .env file with our own machine credentials, and then npm start. So let's navigate into our directory, and I'm going to open up the files in VS Code, but you're welcome to use your own code editor. And you can see some scaffolding is set up for us. We have an src directory with a main.ts file. We could take a look at that closer later, but we have a .env file that we need to update now. So let's make our windows a little bit smaller. And the instructions said to go to the connect page of the Viam app. So back in the Viam app, let's see if we can't get this side by side. Okay, so in the Viam app, let's go over to the connect page. And we can already see our machine address. That's the first credential we'll need. Copy that to our clipboard and paste it in there. Okay. API key and API key ID. So in the code sample section, let's select our SDK language. We're creating a TypeScript app. You can scroll down and see here's a code sample that Viam is generating for us. And there's a couple placeholders here for API key and API key ID. Let's toggle on include API key. And now we can see Viam is substituting in our API credentials here. So the first one is our API key. The second one is our API key ID right here. All right, so our .env file looks pretty good here. Let's save our changes. And the last instruction that was in the command line was to start our server. All right, looks like we have something running on localhost. So let's drop that into our browser, port 5173. And we see a button called Click Me. Let's open up our DevTools and look at the consoles just in case we have any errors. And then let's actually move this over to one side. And then move this over to the other side. Hopefully we can see the side by side. Go back to our control page. Let's find our overhead camera again. Okay, so it's a little bit small. Let's see if I can't optimize the view for you. Okay, so that's our rover that we were playing with earlier. And now here in our TypeScript app, let's click the Click Me button. And it looks like our log statements, we're moving straight, spinning 90 degrees, straight again, spin, straight spin, And we can see that we're driving our rover in a square from our TypeScript app. So how is the code doing that? Let's go back to our code and look at that main.ts file once again. So you can see we're pulling in our .env variables, and there's a function defined here to move in a square. Okay, so it's just looping over and alternating between moving straight and spinning 90 degrees. Okay, and it looks like it's using default methods with the Viam API. And then a little bit further down, here's our button push. And then our const main is where we actually connect to our Viam machine using our credentials. All right, so if we wanted to control and maybe add another function, right now we have one function, move in square. We can control the business logic here. And then our click me button page was pretty sparse. We can always go to index.html. We have a button here, but we can then enrich it with more HTML elements. And that's the Viam TypeScript SDK in action.